go ahead and get started. I don't see Mayor Cantor. Deputy Mayor, do you know if she's joining us?
I am uncertain, sorry.
Okay. All right. I'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll go ahead and get started, okay?
Madam Chair, Matt Hart, Town Manager. The mayor will be joining us, but she is running a few minutes late. She's attending another meeting now.
Okay.
I think she asked not to hold us up.
Wait, okay. All right, so then we'll go ahead and get started. I'll call the meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, and it's about 6:31. This is our virtual Public Safety Committee meeting, and this meeting will be available live on West Hartford Community Interactive, Comcast Channel 5, and Frontier TV Channel 6098, YouTube, as well as www.whctv.org. We'll go ahead. Let me just recognize everybody around the virtual screen. I see Deputy Mayor Davidoff, Councilor Gold, AC Terra, Councilor Winograd, Councilor Williams, Chief Priest, a gentleman from Leisure Services that I don't recognize. So you can introduce yourself.
This is Helen Rubino Turco from Leisure Services and Social Services.
Okay.
And we also have with us Astrid Calderon from Social Services.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I think there's that Battalion Chief Mike Siniscali. Did I get that correct? And Chief, I'm sorry, why am I drawing, Riddick, sorry. I don't know why I was drawing a blank. Forgive me. Okay, I think I have everybody. Did I forget anyone?
Lieutenant Aaron Bacchiatis with the police department.
Okay, that's the face that I didn't recognize. Thank you for that introduction and clarification. All right. First item up on the agenda for business items is the meeting minutes from March 3rd, 2021. I hope everybody had a chance to review that. And were there any questions or corrections that needs to be made? All right, hearing none, let's go forward. So we have the first, oh, you know what? Let me just back up a bit because I do want to acknowledge Chief Priest's birthday today. So I just want to say happy birthday to you, Chief Priest. The birthdays is always special. So hope you had a great day and wishing you even a more fantastic year ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was hoping Chief Riddick wasn't going to find out, but the cat's out of the bag now. Thank you very much, Counselor, and all those for the best wishes.
All right. Let's go to the agenda item for the Panhandling Initiative. Let's see, Mr. Hart, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, thank you. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's meeting. Madam Chair, I see Councilor Fay has also joined us. So on the Panhandling Initiative, this is something the committee's been discussing for a little while now. We've got a good interdisciplinary team working on this, social services combined with the police department. We have reviewed a couple of suggestions that committee members and other council members have passed forward. We have been working on this initiative actually since 2019. We have a draft report prepared. We need to revise just a little bit and then we will send it along to you. But we can speak to it tonight. So we have representatives from both social services and the police department who could do that. And Madam Chair, I would ask that you first recognize Helen Rubino Turco, who can coordinate tonight's discussion.
Okay, Mrs. Turco, please start us off.
Thank you. Thank you. So we were asked to look into the issue of panhandling. Obviously, this is a social issue that is much more complicated than meets the eye. And I should also recognize that our working group includes not just our police department and social services, but also Corporation Counsel. Cynthia Latour couldn't be with us this evening, but she has contributed mightily to the efforts of this working group. So I think it's important for us also to define that there's a difference between aggressive. There are two distinct kinds of panhandling. There's aggressive panhandling and passive panhandling. And when we started out looking at this, of course, the first thing we did was collected data. So we first looked at the volume of calls that were coming into the police department with complaints or members of the public, as well as we also initiated a study to go and interview a survey of the panhandlers that were actually in our town. So our social services and police went into the field and interviewed 10 or 15 panhandlers in town. And we also spoke to our partners in the community, people who work with them on a regular basis. And really, whatever we do, whatever decisions we decide to take, actions we decide to take, we really have to take into consideration what our neighboring towns and cities are doing. And we really feel that this is something that requires a regional approach. So with that being said, we went into our data gathering, and we also explored then some possible actions. We discussed, looked into an ordinance several years ago, some years ago. Pat Allaire, our former corporation counsel, had drafted an ordinance. So we started with that. We also looked at all of the ordinances that were in the region. We also looked at what the impact, right? So every action has repercussions. So we also looked at what the repercussions of an ordinance would be. What would that look like to our social services, to our police department, to community court? And then we also looked at a public message, a public education campaign, basically, that would be 2- or 3-fold. That was, we could certainly consider a signage on the street. We could consider a web page that was dedicated to information about panhandling, and also perhaps other methods, articles, banners, that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, whatever actions we take, as I said, really should be done in consideration of what is going on in our neighboring communities. So when we first talk, about the data collection, as I said, we had complaint calls and we did the survey. We have the data from that, but what you will pretty much find is that almost none of them are West Hartford residents. Almost all of them have some other complicating social issue that contributes to their panhandling. And most of them, the majority of them, are passive, right? We did have a small number of aggressive panhandlers in West Hartford. They have received consequences such as incarceration due to criminal activity that was unrelated to panhandling. We also have someone in hospital, inpatient treatment due to mental health issues. So as you may gather from this, the majority are passive. That is to say, they hold up a sign. They don't really usually speak. They just have a sign that says, usually it's a lie. It says, I'm a veteran, I'm pregnant, I'm homeless. We know that these things are not true because we've interviewed them. Our staff, our committee has interviewed them. And then We also know that sometimes it is simply because Lieutenant Aaron Viafides can certainly chime in. It is also opportunity. You can make a lot of money panhandling in West Hartford. So it's also kind of just an opportunity. So again, the majority of the panhandlers that you see in West Hartford are not aggressive, they are passive. And so there are different ways to go about addressing those two kinds of panhandling. An ordinance is something that Corporation Council reviewed. Some people have said anecdotally, oh, Hartford, something changed in Hartford. They passed a law that changed. And so all of a sudden everyone's coming here. In fact, what she found was that in 1995, the city of Hartford did enact an ordinance. Perhaps a couple of years ago, they started to enforce it, which may be that they went and said, you guys can't come here, you got to clear out. And then they started to move to West Hartford. Other municipalities have enacted very similar language to Hartford's ordinance, including Waterbury, New Britain, Enfield, Rocky Hill, Middletown. They've all got something similar, perhaps the only difference being what's the enforcement provision. And so most municipalities issue a fine, but that, a small fine. And so we can certainly look at an ordinance and discuss with you, especially when Corporation Council's here, what kind of teeth you want to include if you decided an ordinance was an action that you wanted to take. Of course, there's always an impact of an ordinance. The goal of any consequence, of course, would be to connect the people with the programs and services, the resources that they need. Hartford Community Court, which is a state court, targets quality of life misdemeanors and infractions like panhandling. Community court is also a really great place to connect people with resources. So as she was doing her research, Cynthia Latour also spoke to numerous people at various levels in community court, and they were very interested in knowing about what we planned to do, having some input and giving some advice. Some of them have been studying panhandling for years and are quite expert in it. And so again, this sort of reiterated what we knew from the beginning, and that was many of the people or the nonprofits that work with either homeless or with panhandlers really should be part of the conversation before we launch into actions, right? Because they're the ones that see what the repercussions are, and they may have good advice that we may want to hear. So sometimes then, as you know, it's community court. Many of the defendants that arrive at the court for these low-level violations actually have significant social issues that that certainly require a meaningful response. Sometimes it is lack of resources. Sometimes it's a history of substance abuse or mental health issues. It could be, something like unemployment or an illness that changed their lifestyle. Many of them qualify for services, but they just are not connecting on their own. And Assistant Chief Tara will tell you, you offer it, they just don't want it. They would prefer to just collect the money. So social services, and Astrid can explain more if needed about this. We have a social worker who goes to Hartford Community Court once a week. As you probably know, Hartford Community Court has been closed for a year. But our social worker provides high quality intervention and services that are necessary to address these kinds of issues. The court, as Cynthia can also tell you, has developed partnerships with a lot of area services, including social services that deliver specialized plans or treatments. Sometimes these misdemeanor or panhandlers are assigned to do community service. And Cynthia Latour also spoke to Community Partners in Action, which is the organization that facilitates the specific community service assignment that they receive from the court. So certainly an organization like that should also be included in some sort of discussion about our response to panhandling. So another action, aside from an ordinance that then has repercussions in community court and in social services and in the police department, and probably, well, anyway, lots of other places, is a public education campaign. So Aaron looked into signage because we had seen, I believe that Representative Gold had given us some ideas there. And so Aaron did a lot of research about other communities around the country that have employed signage, and including Scottsdale, Arizona, but also Santa Fe, New Mexico, Charlotte, North Carolina, Milwaukee, Greenville, South Carolina, Fort Worth, and others. So it's not a new idea, but you know, and these signs could be of a variety of messages. So those are all options that we have looked at. If we decide that the action of a sign is what you want, you know, we have opinions about the message and the style. It should be noted that at least one partner organization in the field who works directly with affected people recommends against the negative, you know, don't give. There's been a lot of discussion amongst our group about the pushback that can come from putting up, undertaking an action like putting up signs. That goes the gamut from who's paying for that sign, are my tax dollars going there, to don't tell me what to do, don't tell me what I should and shouldn't do, I'm going to do what I want to do. And so obviously our role as when we're talking about a public education campaign is signs that also are accompanied by news articles and a website that has a dedicated page on our website, and I'm sure IT can create a quick link to it that'll fit on a little sign. But the idea being that we also want to educate our community about this incredibly complex social issue. You know, it's not just, oh, they're greedy, or oh, they're a drug addict. You know, there's a lot of things that go into it. There was one of the signs that Aaron found said, contribute to the solution, right? Change the way you deal with your change. And the idea being that if people went to our website, they might find we could have a committee vet some of our local organizations that deal with this in the field, and they could be the beneficiary of small donations from people, right? So instead of giving to the panhandler, you might give to X organization or Y organization. Now, we don't necessarily want to be in the business of endorsing one business over another, but if we had a committee of people that looked at them, and certainly, you know, we would want to have conversations with all of these organizations anyway, just to make sure that they were comfortable with being a beneficiary, or what would that look like. So again, you know, we could have a QR code that people could scan and go to for more information and see, where should I give if I'm not giving to this person. And Aaron also did a great job kind of setting up some benchmarks about how could we measure the success of this program. So, for example, when he spoke to Scottsdale, Arizona, the person there in charge of this program, they didn't have data about, well, okay, so yeah, we noticed less panhandlers, but was there any substantive change over time? And they didn't have that. So he suggested that, we devise a way of measuring how many times do people use the QR code to connect to the website, how many website visits, how many visits on the website, how long does it take, how many people click through to actually make a donation, that kind of thing. And obviously we would need to all along be developing a website that that had a list of our resources that explained in layman's terms, the issues, but also had some solutions. So the long and short of it is, we suggest that we begin by talking to some of these experts in our region. We want to establish like a regional roundtable that represents a lot of the diverse perspectives and positions, including representatives from nonprofits that are working in the field, government entities, 211 Mobile Crisis Unit, the Hartford Community Court. We've already got 2 or 3 people from that realm that are very interested in joining us. Police departments, either regionally and obviously social services regionally, to analyze this complex issue around panhandling. And this group may develop for us some regional recommendations that the town council could consider about how to address the societal issues that are affecting panhandling, as well as to meet the needs of our community. They may end up having some recommended actions, but wouldn't it be great if we weren't the only ones that were doing the actions, if Hartford and Newington and Bloomfield and New Britain and East Hartford were all doing it as well, right? So that it was a more regional approach. Obviously, we could address aggressive panhandling through an ordinance. That still wouldn't get to the other kind of panhandling, the passive panhandling. And that's where the public education certainly could help our community. But I think in the end, those are, a sign or a website are sort of quicker fixes. Even an ordinance is sort of a quicker fix. But to establish meaningful relationships between service providers, such as dedicated social workers or a team from a local organization, with the panhandling population is really the long-term solution. It's found in building trust and developing an individualized plan, and it involves lengthy follow-up. And Astrid knows this better than all of us. The best way to achieve success is by developing a plan together and having the person buy into that plan and be held accountable to that plan. And you can't just do that without establishing that trust. So that's a much longer process, but in the end, I think that might be something that we might want to consider. So in a nutshell, again, we recommend a roundtable with these experts. Certainly we can discuss and bring forward an ordinance to you in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We can certainly discuss the signage and bring to you options and samples, but we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We kind of want to hear what community court says, what a Journey Home says, what our other partners in the community say before we jump in to actions. Thank you for listening. I would just invite Astrid or Aaron if they would like to answer any questions, or if they had additional comments to make that we didn't cover. I know the document, the work that we did is very much, the work that Astrid did in the field with Sergeant Riley and with others in the police department earlier. and certainly Aaron putting together a lot of research, and Cynthia doing a lot of other research on the back end with ordinances and rule of law. So
Thank you, Mrs. Turco. Astrid, would you like to go next? Do you have anything to add?
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Astrid Calderon, clinical social worker, manager of social services. We have been working together. We started back in 2009 with a training that the police department, ourselves, and our town manager participated as well. The problem continue through the years. The data that we have is from 2019 to 2021. That data include, like Helen mentioned, surveys. You know, went to all of the corners and we met with all of the panhandlers in the field. That was October 2019. During the pandemic, we stopped, and the police and agent Sergeant Anthony Neal have been able to update us with, again, additional data that contains calls, complaints. The complaints are divided by corner, by panhandlers. There's some of them that are the same ones from 2019. So we have been seeing the same faces. And then there are some new ones. What we are seeing is a group of 10 people, 10 to less than 15, 10 to 12 people. And one of the busiest intersections is a Flatbush corner. And there's several panhandlers from there that are new. Some others that have been in town for more than 5 years. And we know them. We have the information about them. We were able to have a distinction between who is really homeless, who is really a person who have substance abuse issues with, and who is panhandling for many, many years, or have a combination of characteristics. We know the gender, if they have family support. Some of these people have been connected with the Journey Home, with the community court, and some of them have been lost in the process of help. So this is, if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer. The police and ourselves were very close, and we exchange information frequently to see how can we put together some solutions that are at our reach. We do not have designated social workers that can go this type of work in the fields. So during the pandemic and through all these years, we have been trying to do our best to do this type of interventions outside.
Okay, thank you, Astrid. Let's pause here. Do we have any questions for Astrid or even Helen before we go to Lieutenant? No questions? Okay, I have a few questions, so I'm going to ask my questions. I want to say, I'll start with you, Helen. In terms of what I found interesting when you said that lots of money is being made. Now, that was just kind of always, I guess, a thought for me, especially my daughters who are always like willing to give money that they really don't have. But on average, just from your research and data collected, what's the average amount of money that's being collected just through panhandling?
I can report from the data that Aaron and his team and Astrid and her team collected. Some individuals reported making the equivalent of $20 to $40 an hour One woman reported collecting almost $1,000 in one day. So again, many of them are using false pretenses to obtain more money by advertising that they're homeless, that they're pregnant, that they're a disabled veteran, et cetera, when in fact they are not.
Thank you. And then the other question that I have, I heard you, both you and Astrid, talk about the partnership and probably the relationships that you have with our neighboring towns. And I often wonder, because I know that you're out there providing assistance and services to these folks. So when I guess a referral is made, and perhaps, I don't know if they get to that particular referral, but like after that, how how soon after are they back out doing the same type of thing? Because I understand, some of the issues may go very deep and it can be a long-term process, but for some reason there's not that connection or they may not stick with it and then we see them again.
I would defer to Astrid.
So this is Astrid. Some of them there have been attempts for connection in terms of providing services. This is a type of work that is done with outreach workers. This is not the type of people that will go to any office to meet with a social worker to do applications for Social Security, food stamps, or even for an apartment. So, in that sense, there's no continuity very often because they will not even be able to do that. So it's a reverse type of work, so the agencies that have outreach workers to do that are in the streets are, for example, the Journey Home, or mobile crisis when it's a mental health. The community partners in action, they don't do that type of work, but they receive all of the people that might need community work, and that are referred through the court. Um, the rate of success will be, for the ones that are able to have continuity of services. For the ones that are not, they continue back to the same corner. The webs of support are not there. Some of them are professional, some of them are family, and some of them, for example, there's one of the panhandlers in the corner of New Britain Avenue and New Park. We know them very well for many, many years. A lot of people have a lot of empathy for her. It's a female, but there's no continuity. And in the other hand, there's also the right to decline services. And there are people that, even though after multiple attempts, they will say, I'm not ready, or I can do this, or I will not go with you. I can't. And therefore, there's no connection. So it's individualized, it's case by case. We will have successes if we go back to the streets one by one and see and do an attempt in connect with other people. We might be able to do it together with other organizations and have a follow-up. That also take months to do that.
Thank you. Another question I have in terms of the complaints, do you find, based on your data, do you have highs and lows in terms of the complaints, and are they seasonal or are they just kind of across the board?
I defer to Aaron
Yeah.
Theophides.
Yeah, so one of the difficulties we have in tracking the complaints is, they're not always complaints.
Sorry, can you just identify yourself?
I'm sorry. Yep. I'm Lieutenant Aaron Bafiatis with the Community Relations Division of the Police Department. So yeah, when we get calls for service, I use call for service and complaints kind of synonymous here. One of the difficulties we have in tracking that data is that they're not always entered the same way. We could be dispatched out for a welfare check for an individual who happens to be a panhandler. There's 5, 6, 7 different call types that we could be sent out to address a panhandling issue. So that's something that we're working on our end is a better way of tracking all complaints involving panhandlers. So that data is relatively difficult to track. So how I researched that was I basically did a keyword search of the word panhandler, which dragged in all calls for service that had that word in the computer-aided dispatch system. So my numbers were guesstimates. And to answer your question, I think that it peaks in the warmer months, obviously with more people out there. But as we saw in the past year, it was relatively steady with people on their corner. Mostly the same people standing in the same spots.
Thank you. And I do have one final question, and I'm not sure if you can answer it or maybe our town manager. So I've noticed maybe in the past 6 months or so, these tent cities starting to go up close to our bordering town. And excuse me, as a result of those tent cities, I've seen increasing number of waste, garbage. So I'm just curious in terms of working with our partners, our neighboring partners, are there some type of ordinances or something in place to address that? Matt, please take that.
And thank you, Matt Hart, Town Manager. So yes, Counselor, and thank you for bringing those issues to our attention. Most that activity, we did send inspectors out into the field, our zoning officer in particular. And I think as you noted, it's occurring in Hartford on our border. So, I've encouraged our staff to reach out to their counterparts in Hartford to see how they can best address it. Our understanding is they have a similar set of ordinances like we do. They probably have a property maintenance code or something similar to it. So that's the effort we're trying right now. Obviously, it's still there. Is our staff going out inspecting in the field when they note something, communicating with their counterparts in Hartford and asking them to take corrective action.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to just add something from my perspective, and thanks for the presentations tonight. This like many other issues is a policy decision, and it's a complicated one. From my perspective, as I've looked into this issue, the way the courts have handled panhandling is that they've decided you can't regulate speech. You can't regulate someone's ability to ask for money. But what they have said is that if the speech is behavioral, then it can be regulated. And that goes to the aggressive. And so in my opinion, when we have individuals that loom over stopped vehicles that have to be stopped because of a traffic signal, that in and of itself creates a captive audience. And I think at that moment, you can argue that that is aggressive panhandling. And I know other municipalities have done just that. So I don't agree with the premise that we have a majority passive panhandling in this town. I think the majority is actually the opposite. I think it's actually aggressive. When I'm in a corner with my daughter and there's a full-grown man looming outside the window, that doesn't feel passive to me. And so what we have here, and it's sad for those panhandlers, but what we have is commerce. We have commerce that really is unregulated by the town, and it's positioning itself to garner more commerce. I mean, there are certain street corners, we all know what they are. They're the same individuals over and over again. and it's a form of commerce. So the decision from our end is, do we want to regulate it? And if so, how do we want to regulate it? And I just think, I'm concerned that if we think that if we approach this issue with the position that certain forms of panhandling is passive and permissible at the start, I don't know that we're going to be able to address the issue overall, even if we do address a lot of the more social positions on it, dealing with the social workers and what have you. Because I think fundamentally what we have is whether or not we're going to tolerate panhandling at stopped traffic signals. I mean, I think that's the narrow issue. And then there's issues like at the bus stop or at ATMs, which we don't have. We don't have panhandling that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong, in the traditional sense that we would think about, like randomly on the street. It's more positioned. At least that's the issue I complain about. So I just want to contribute that perspective for what it's worth. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Matt Hart, Town Manager. In response to Councilor Williams' point, we can certainly ask Corporation Counsel to look at that to see whether or not they think that activity would constitute aggressive panhandling, and if we could build it into the proposed ordinance. One of the challenges with the ordinance, though, as Helen talked about, Ms. Rubino Turco talked about, is the penalty going to be sufficient to deter the activity? That's one of the real challenges with this, because oftentimes the folks in community court, it's a bit of a revolving door. And if the penalty is often community service, if there's a citation or a fine, that can be difficult to collect, not impossible. But that's one of the things we have to look at, and that's one of the reasons why the ordinance itself is only one piece of a potential solution.
Thank you. Councilor Gold.
Thank you, Councilor Blanks, and through you, Lee Gold. I actually had a question, and I know Chief Riddick's been very silent about this, but I did have a question relative to what Helen had mentioned, that and Astrid, that you did go out, canvass, talk to the people who were identifying as panhandlers, where they come from, that they're not necessarily from West Hartford itself, but we identified how they actually get here. If there's one or two or a group of people who are actually bringing them into town, if that is happening, and whether or not that would constitute any sort of different activity, especially considering the false representations that they're making in terms of pregnancies, in terms of veterans, things of that nature, and whether or not there should be an investigation that needs to be activated to determine whether or not there is a grand scheme that's occurring in our town by transporting people in to effectively make, I think you said $20 to $40 an hour.
Councilor Gold, we kind of lost you at the end there. Did we lose him?
Looks like he might have momentarily timed out, Madam Chair. But perhaps Chief Riddick can respond when Mr. Gold gets his connection back.
I can respond now through you, Madam Chair and Mr. Manager, with your indulgence. It possibly
Chief
consider.
Riddick, how about we give him a few, because if you respond, he's not going to be able to. Okay, there he is. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry about that. I hope you heard.
We lost you towards the end, so perhaps you can just summarize what you were saying towards the end.
What I was talking about, and I don't know when it cut off, but I was more concerned about a grand scheme and strategy that seems to be occurring, and whether or not there's been an indication or investigation that might be opened as to how these people that we're identifying as panhandlers get into town and create this commerce by way of, as Councilor Williams indicated, a commerce, a trade, so to speak, by providing false statements in terms of pregnancy, in terms of veteranship, and things of that nature. And whether or not this is something that Chief Riddick or the staff has looked into in terms of a grand potential criminal activity.
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick.
Go ahead, Chief Riddick.
All right, thank you. First, my silence is only because I have people tasked to do this, and they were doing the legwork, and I thought it was a great opportunity for you folks to see them and hear from them and let you know the excellent workers that we have working behind the scenes. It was a good opportunity for them to get some face time. Secondly, the criminal enterprise and or conspiracy charges, I don't see those applying here. 2 years ago, when we did do the research and we did work with social services, some drove, others took public transportation. And if we recall, in 2020, public transportation was free on the bus transit and the Connecticut Transit. So people were coming in for free. What the town manager spoke about and touched upon is extremely important, and I hope we understand what he's saying. Regardless if it did apply and we had information for that, the penalty is nothing's going to happen and it's not going to solve the problem. What is going to work for a deterrent? Okay, I guess for that day or two, we still can take the action as we do now. If someone steps off the sidewalk and impedes traffic and we observe that, that's disorderly conduct. If they're on the sidewalks and they're blocking sidewalks and people can't get by, it's obstruction of free passage on the sidewalk. So we already have criminal statutes in place to cover that. But let's just be honest here. That's not going to solve the problem. These people need to eat. These people are going to find a way to make money. And we need to solve the social issues, which are forcing some of them to be in these situations. And then I don't understand how we get past the constitutional component of this and what might happen afterwards. So we will do whatever we need to do. We have made arrests. I can't think of the gentleman, if Lieutenant Vafiatis or AC Terra can speak his name, who was very aggressive. We put out warrants for him. We arrested him several times. He was a nuisance in the center, but his name, I can't think of his name. It escapes me.
Leonard Green, sir.
Leonard, thank you, Leonard Green. So we've been down this road for those folks. So we'll take whatever avenue that needs to be taken. But I think the important thing is we want to solve the problem. And arresting our way out of this is just not going to work. And with all due respect, and it's not to Councilor Gold, I'm just talking in general, so I'll jump on my soapbox for 2 seconds. We have criminals in stolen motor vehicles, shooting people, and they're not staying in jail. So I just being honest to tell you that it's not going to work with panhandlers. But it's a good question and it makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any questions for the chief? Councilor Fay?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Blanks. Yes, Chief Riddick, I have a very quick question. I was just wondering how some of the other surrounding towns like Avon or Farmington, even Glastonbury, if you go east of the river, don't seem to have the same problem. And they do have centers and they do have, some similar demographics and composites. So I don't see them even going through Manchester and East Hartford, which you would expect to see panhandlers. They're simply not there. So what are these towns, and maybe you don't know, but maybe somebody else might have some insight, but what are these other towns doing that are keeping them out? And is there, I don't know, a best practice or something that we may be able to adopt? So thank you, Mrs. Blanks, and thank you, Chief Riddick.
Madam Chair, through you, Chief Riddick. First, I speak to the other chiefs that in the towns that you mentioned. and they do have the same issues, not to the scale that we do. And we'll take this as a positive, and I don't mean to be flippant, but West Hartford is a destination place. There's a lot of traffic here. You'll get more bang for your buck. And I believe Helen, Lieutenant Vafiatis, and Astrid had mentioned before, it's very profitable to be in West Hartford. And just from the investigator part of me, you mentioned that you don't see those in those places. Well, you probably spend more time in West Hartford, where you're probably going to see more of them. And I think if you were to make some phone calls and speak to some of those folks that actually live there, maybe not to the extent or the scale that we have here, but I know for a fact there is a problem because I've spoken to those chiefs.
Thank you. I was just trying to get some kind of calibration because the towns I mentioned, I do visit. Certainly, I live here and I'm here much more frequently for sure. I was just wondering if they were, I don't know, there was some secret that they were doing that seemed to keep them at bay. But thank you for the clarity.
Thank you, Councilor Fay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Hart?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank all the staff who've been working on this effort to date. As Ms. Rubino Turco explained, we identified some action steps. We're going to be convening this regional roundtable with both our public sector and nonprofit partners. We are working on a draft ordinance related to aggressive panhandling. We'll take a look at the issue that Councilor Williams identified earlier this evening. We're also looking at working on the public education campaign, which would include signage and other things. And then last but not least, looking at resource allocation in terms of how we can dedicate more social worker time in particular to this problem. And we will keep you updated and regularly report to the committee on our progress. Once we have a draft ordinance, we will submit it to you for your review, and you can decide whether or not it needs revision or if you want to send it on to the full council.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Thank you, everybody. This was a great discussion and a great presentation by staff. I thank you. I know this is a very hard and sensitive issue. It's one that we probably struggle and grapple with every day because you have a combination of some of those things that was discussed here tonight, but more to come. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is training outline for the Civilian Police Review Board. I'm going to defer to both Mr. Hart and Chief Priest.
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those of you who have access to board docs, we have attached a document. This is the recommended outline for the training that we're recommending for the new Civilian Police Review Board. And you will be making your appointments at next week's council meeting on May 11th. The members, the police department, Chief Riddick, Assistant Chief Tara, worked with Corporation Counsel and myself to put together. We understand that you haven't had a chance to look at it just yet. I would, through you, like to ask Chief Riddick to provide a brief overview, and then maybe over the next month or so, you can look at it in more detail, and we can carry it as continuing business at next month's meeting. That's my recommendation, Madam Chair, and would now ask Chief Riddick to speak, to provide a brief overview.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Chief Riddick.
Chief Riddick, through you, Madam Chair. Really quick, through collaboration with the town manager under his direction, the PD, in addition with Corporation Counsel, what you'll see here, we broke it down to 8 categories, and there's a lot here. The first category is just a brief orientation. Moving on to Municipal Oversight Board, and there's various subcategories there. Legal considerations, which we thought is very important to have to understand the implications and the laws involved. the West Hartford Police Department Citizens Police Academy, and some of the best practices and rules of conduct and other things that we go through the Citizens Academy in a more abridged version. We provide that training for the members. The next category, number 5, is board procedures, intake, review procedures, and the like. Number 6 is a ride-along. 7, when I say ride-along, and with a participant, a board member would actually ride with the patrol officer. We're probably recommending about half a shift and to get a feel of what it's like to be in a police cruiser and responding to calls for service. Use of force simulator. We really think this is important. It might be a road trip. The best simulator that I've seen is probably one of the best in the state is at the Milford Police Department. It could cost them probably upwards of close to $600,000, which they got through asset forfeiture, but it's absolutely phenomenal. And what they do is they take real life situations that have occurred nationwide. They put them into the simulator. So these aren't made up scenarios. These are things that actually have occurred, and you go through them. And they also have the capacity to put forth training simulations and scenarios too to help the officers and the public. In my previous job, we brought members of the public there, and I think it's very, very helpful to provide insight. And lastly, simulations is where you go through a couple of scenarios where we call simulations, which are paintballs, if you will, and we go through various situations where you use use of force or no use of force. And these are the things that we do with our officers. You know, many times when you hear use of force, you think that's the public thinks that we're training to use force. Most of the times it's putting you into scenarios where you don't use force and to have excellent decision making and to use your verbal judo and de-escalation techniques. That's a quick overview. We're thinking somewhere around 24 hours, 3 days. We would like some input as much as possible as you go through this outline, what you think is good, what you think is not so good, and we can adjust as needed. But we think it's comprehensive, and there's a lot of great stuff in here that we think could be very helpful to the board members. So I want to thank everybody who participated in this, and especially AC Tara, who really drafted it and did all the spell check for us. So if you see any errors, blame him.
Thank you, Chief. I would just echo, it's so apparent that you all have put in so much hard work and just being thoughtful in terms of how what this training is going to look like, and how beneficial it will be for these members to really understand and have a good idea of what our officers endure on a daily basis. So I just want to really thank everybody for the effort and the time that you put into this. Are there any other questions or comments? Madam Mayor?
Thank you. I also want to thank everybody for their work on this. Assistant Chief Tara, thank you for all you've done. There's been a lot of work done behind the scenes. Really very collaborative, and I'm really, really proud of our community. And I think this is great training. You bleeped out when you said the road trip and where that use of force simulator is. Could you, Chief, just through you, Madam Chair, could you just say where that was? I did not hear the municipality.
But my apologies. Chief Riddick, the Milford Police Department.
Milford. Okay.
Yes. There's also 2 that are closer. I think Manchester has one as well as New Britain, but those are not the Cadillac versions. They're better what we have. We don't have one, but the excellent one is in Milford. Thank you. And we'll provide transportation. We'll provide transportation.
Awesome. Great. We should probably all go through it too, but I also, I just want to make sure that all of the 10 board members, the 7 to the regular board and the 3 alternates are all going to go through the same training, correct? Yes.
Chief Riddick, that is accurate. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, because I do anticipate that the alternates will fill in on a fairly regular basis. I think it'll be more of a functioning, yeah. And no, I think it's terrific. And is there any other municipality that you're aware of that has a full citizens civilian review board that's been established and functioning? And I don't know about Hartford and their structure, so I don't think they had been functioning, but I think they are now. So I don't know if there's an update on that.
Chief Riddick, I'm not aware of who have stood up CPRBs as a result of the new law, but I do know, as you mentioned, New Haven, Waterbury, it's a different version, and Hartford had things on the books, and other police departments did also, but I'm not aware of those who have stood one up as a result of this. I'm also aware of, I think it's Greenwich or Westport most recently had a town meeting. It's one of those two. And they are in the process of standing one up now. And it was much vigorous debate about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Thank you very much. And again, I much appreciate it. And I also want to just take the moment to just thank everybody also that's been working on the panhandling. It is a very, as I think our chair said very well, it's a complicated issue. It's difficult. It's hard. And I appreciate all of your input and all your help. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hart?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Just to add to Chief Riddick's response to the mayor's question, as I think the cities are actively working on this, including Hartford. Not aware of, there are a number of towns as well that are beginning to work on it. I think they're probably in a similar status, if not slightly behind us. And I am starting to get a number of inquiries from some of our neighbors looking at our ordinance as a potential best practice. So kudos to the committee for your good work today.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. All right, if there's nothing further, we can move to the next agenda item. Again, thank you, Chief. Fire Department Efficiency and Effectiveness Study. So I'm going to again go to Mr. Hart and Chief Priest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'd like to just add a few quick comments and then turn it over to Chief Priest. Committee members will recall that, before the pandemic, we were just starting to dig into some of the key topics from the efficiency and effectiveness study that Fitch Associates conducted for us a couple of years ago now. And obviously due to current events, we had to suspend that discussion for some period of time. But we really would like to re-engage. We think it's very important for the future of the department and the service we provide to our community. So I have asked Chief Priest to put together an outline of key topics that we would like to review with this committee in over the next several months. So now through you, Madam Chair, would like to recognize Chief Priest.
Thank you, Chief Priest.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This will probably be a fairly short agenda item for us tonight. I know we're getting into the meeting tonight. The last time I saw you, we were on a long night as well. So thanks for your patience. As the manager has alluded to, I do think that we're on the back half of the pandemic, and it is time to get back to some of the core mission of the fire department and discuss it and really bring some matters forward to the Public Safety Committee. I've enjoyed our conversations in the past. I was looking forward to it with the last time around. And certainly, most importantly, we made a very significant investment in Fitch. It occurred prior to my arrival, but as I kind of acclimated to it, we invested both time, process, and effort in it. And I really felt like we benefited from the outside analysis. I think there was value in it at the time that we purchased it. I think that there was value when we received the report. And more importantly, I still think there's more value in going through some of the recommendations. As you know, Fitch, certainly national consultant, considered to be a subject matter expert. They've made some recommendations for us. And as we evaluate, I think we need to evaluate those recommendations together and really have a good foundation for that to make sure that, our newer members of the Public Safety Committee and that we bring up, current events of what's occurred in the fire department. And just for context, you see the topic line, or excuse me, you see some of the topics in the schedule that we've proposed. Many of their outstanding recommendations are items that have come before the council before, such as our EMS deployment, the facilities that our personnel are housed in, as well as some of the issues in our fire marshal's office with our inspection. So I really relish the opportunity to go through that with the council and really speak to you about it, and at a time and pace that's appropriate. So I believe in your board docs, you do have the topics that we've proposed, certainly some flexibility to move those subjects around. We proposed some dates. So, I guess, kind of closing up, that the manager really has it, which is this is about the future of the fire department. It's the vision and the path. It's things that we've spoken about before at the Public Safety Committee. I am firmly believe that it will be beneficial for the policymakers to go through, but in the process, it'll also impact the people who are going to be most affected by this, which is our fire department. They need a vision. It will help me as the chief to guide under your direction and the manager's direction, but also our community to be able to, have you as the policymakers be able to receive information and provide it back out. So, tonight, I think the manager and my request is your approval of the schedule that you have either written or as amended. And then tonight, I'd be glad to hear any thoughts that you may have on that. And I look forward to your guidance or advice on this matter. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any questions or comments for the chief? All right. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chairwoman Blanks. I'm glad to see that the Fitch study is coming back onto the agenda of the Public Safety Committee. It's had a pretty long hiatus, and I think there's a lot of things that we can implement to achieve more efficiency in the department. I think that's one of the reasons we undertook the study. We didn't just undertake the study for a study's sake. We basically undertook it to put forward action steps, and even without implementing all the items in there, I think it's worth noting this evening that the move to the intercept vehicles and not using the heavy apparatus to respond to medical calls and the wear and tear on those vehicles has definitely extended the life of those pieces of apparatus and has reduced the risk of any danger or malfunction or them being hit responding to a call. So for all those reasons, I think we were able to be forward thinking, and I think that's the mode that we were working in prior to that. So I'm glad this evening to hear that you've got a schedule. I don't have a problem with the schedule you've outlined. I think if we stick to it and we get the supporting documentation prior to the public safety meeting, that we can have a robust discussion during the meeting so that we can take action steps necessary to implement some of these things. I think that will be quite helpful. So if the meeting is scheduled for the first week in June, if we could get that by possibly the third week in May with respect to what we're going to be talking about, we can review it on our own and come up with some talking points necessary to be effective. If we see it just the night of, I don't think it's going to be very helpful. So if we could just operate in that sense, I think from my point of view, it would be really very good to do that. And as we go through some of these things, I think it would also be helpful that we don't have to wait till we go through the entire Fitch study to take action steps. So if things are ripe for action, I think we can then move them forward to the council table, or if it doesn't need to be a policy decision on the table, you, Chief, through your command, can implement these things to recognize and achieve the efficiencies and the effectiveness necessary for the department. Since on a day-to-day basis, you know best as to how it can make things better. Because I think at the end of the day, and I think the purpose looking back at it was we have an excellent fire department. we want to make it even more better, if that's a term. But I think that's where we're going with that, and I'm really glad to hear tonight that all the money that we spent on the Fitch study isn't going to waste. We're going to see it through to the end. And it also would be helpful, Mr. Manager, if you could supply us with the various sections of the Fitch study. That would be part of the discussion for the evening, because and I'm certain there's others who probably would have to dig pretty far to find their hard copy of the Fitch study at this point. But I'm certain I could find it if necessary. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that we have been talking about going in-person meetings effective fairly soon. I think at the May 11th council meeting, we will probably be in hybrid format for a while. But I do want to make sure that we are filming this meeting, especially the Fitch study, so that maybe that can be in a file where people, our residents, can review the items discussed in that Fitch study, and we can, sort of have that as a bit of a linear follow through, so people can understand decision making. And we're going to have to refer to, as a deputy mayor said, the sections of the study. I think that will be helpful. So I just would want to make sure that we are at least filming that portion. I'm not sure how that works with the hybrid. And yes, Mr. Well, I didn't mean to call on you, Madam Chair. You have a hand raised.
First off, are you finished, Madam Mayor? Because
I am. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Hart, you may go. You're recognized.
Matt Hart, Town Manager, thank you. So first, in response to Deputy Mayor's request, yes, we will provide you with the relevant sections of the report in advance of the meeting and give you time to review and digest them. And then with respect to the mayor's request, I think it would be easier to facilitate that if we could meet in the legislative chambers. That's where we are set up to record. I know that's a more formal space. But really, that's where we could record the meetings and these sessions would be if we use that room. And we can work to schedule that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I just want to make sure that if people, this is a committee meeting and not everybody can, I know I have a conflict on June 2nd. So I just want to make sure that there will be a way for, people to participate if they're either not here or watch it on. So it sounds like the watching will be fine. But I'm not sure how the hybrid is going to work then. And I don't know if we have an answer for that now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hart.
Matt Hart, Town Manager. We'll have more clarity soon, Mayor. I do know that we plan to continue to use WebEx as at least for audio purposes, and that provides us with the recording function as well. But for these sessions, we'll explore options to capture the video component.
Okay, Mr. Hart, was that it?
On that point, yes. Yep. We'll look to see what we can do to record these meetings so that they're available to committee members and other members of the council. We'll make it happen.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this issue before we move to communication? Do we have any items for communications?
Matt Hart, Town Manager, not this evening, Madam Chair. We do have staff reports, something, and I think we can go through these relatively quickly. Chief Priest, Chief Riddick, and then myself.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart. So Chief Priest.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I just didn't want to lose the low battery on my PC. Apparently I knocked off the power cord. So as far as my staff report tonight, certainly you've already heard a little bit from me. I did attach a written report in the board docs. Thanks for Urida for putting it up. I did just want to make a short shout out to my staff because they take a significant amount of time to gather that data for me to submit the report. So I did want to say thanks to them for that. As I mentioned before, certainly we're still in the pandemic, but our focus has been on the vaccinations, whether supporting the clinic, supporting the health district, or providing medical standbys. But as far as the fire department, our workforce is very stable. We don't have anybody out with COVID right now, and we're watching the trends go down for COVID in our community, at least from the emergency services side for EMS. We have an open hiring process right now for EMTs and for paramedics until June, and we are hoping that this will result in a larger, more diverse candidate pool for us. This will be the first time that we've had no firefighter certification for EMTs required in quite some time. So we've moved forward. I know I had the opportunity to speak with the Public Safety Committee about some of our other hiring initiatives. We have moved forward with some of our longer term strategies to remove barriers for our candidate pool. And we have engaged the school district in some of the discussions about how to do that very early on with the youth and encouraging them to come into this career field. Operationally, out on the street, we are watching a little bit of a downward trend in our call volume. We're monitoring it. I don't really have any reason to assign any reason for that, but we're just watching it. We're paying attention to it. We have had several extrications lately. One was out on the highway where the jaws of life was used, so that came in at an interesting time. So looking forward to your support of our capital budget relative to the replacement of our rescue tools. And as part of reviewing the report, I also noted that a lot of our folks have increased the amount of training hours that they're doing. So I just wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out and let you know that our firefighters have been doing a significant amount of training, more hours than I've ever seen before. In our other divisions, Bob McHugh has done some outstanding work in reforming the CERT team, and I appreciate the council support of that and the interest of the council in participating in that. I believe, I think the number I heard was closing in on 70 people who are interested and would be looking at moving into 2 classes. So my note to myself is I think that speaks to the community that we live in and the people that would like to join in helping others. So thanks to Bob for his efforts and the media releases that he's put together and the engagement that he's found with that. And then lastly, I alluded to it at the budget season. We have a lot of life saving that is going on inside of the department with our paramedics. And it's really nice to see. There's almost so much that I can't report on all of it, but we have cardiac arrest where people are walking out of the hospital. It's fantastic. I'm also watching, along the lines of life safety, I'm watching our fire marshal's office has improved the amount of inspections. We're really engaging our company officer inspection program. One of our recent fire marshal staff has completed her training, so she's now contributing to that workforce over there and improving the inspections. And I didn't want that to go past us because certainly inspections is part of preventing the fires. And so Chief Cincigali is on tonight, so good work by his. And then lastly, I'm just going to close you out with a report. I'm going to hit it briefly. I think you'll probably read about it in the media shortly, but one of our lieutenants had a very remarkable experience. I believe that he saved a life the other day. He came home to his girlfriend's residence. His name is Lieutenant Bob Howe. He's been on our job for about 21 years. He came home to his girlfriend's residence. He's actually out on injury. He was in the car, and his girlfriend began screaming that there was smoke inside of her condominium. And Bob, jumped into action despite his injury. Found that the condominium was on fire. Her teenage son, was inside of the building, had not escaped, was not able to egress the building. Bob, put himself into harm's way. He made it into the building, was pushed back by heat and fire, but was able to make verbal contact with the son and help guide him out of the house. And then again, risking his own safety because they were in a condo complex, he helped use a garden hose to keep the fire at bay from extending to other condominiums. So the heat that was experienced there was enough that it melted part of the clothing on the teenage boy. So this was a fairly impressive incident, and I really wanted to highlight that this is something that just shows that the West Hartford firefighters go above and beyond sometimes. So I'm very proud of Bob. Unfortunately, maybe to a fault, I don't impress easily, but Chief O'Callahan and I were certainly very impressed, and hopefully you'll be able to read about that in the media shortly. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight. Glad to take any questions that you may have of me.
Thank you, Chief, and I'm wishing him a speedy recovery, and kudos to him, because that means that he's not on just at certain hours, but he's on all the time. So please send him our get well wishes, and fantastic job. Does anyone have any other questions for Chief? Counselor Williams?
Well, first off, happy birthday, Chief, again. I'm sure you wanted to spend it here. But listen, I want to say something to you that I heard feedback. We had our just policy differences in the past, but I have heard from many residents about the department's assistance with administering the vaccines, particularly with elderly folks in the community. And the positive feedback has been overwhelming. And I've been specifically asked to share that with you. So wanted to extend that and congratulate you and your department on, and thank you for your service during this time, because it is very much appreciated.
Through you, Madam Chair, Greg Priest, Fire Chief, responding to Councilor Williams. Thank you very much, sir. Like Chief Riddick, we share the same mentality, which is we have outstanding teams. You're just lucky enough to see me sitting at the table and reporting on this, but if it weren't for the folks that are out there doing it every day, this wouldn't have happened. But your comments are very much appreciated. The fire department folks have been on the front lines of this, along with law enforcement. It's been a long year and change. And anytime the Public Safety Committee recognizes them for that effort, I know they appreciate it, even though they don't ask for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Williams and Chief Priest. Madam Mayor?
I missed the happy birthday wishes, so I want to start with that. Happy birthday. And I'm sorry it's a meeting night. That's too bad. Sorry. But I also want to thank Councilor Williams for sharing that. I know it means a lot that you shared those stories. And I also want to echo, we do hear so many positive things from all of our public safety interactions with our community, the life-saving interactions, or sometimes just the morale building. So thank you so much. It's really an honor to work with you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, any other questions, comments, congratulatories? All right, why don't we move to Chief Riddick and Police Department reports.
Good evening, Chief Riddick from the Police Department, through you, Madam Chair. I would like to take 2 seconds to congratulate Chief Priest. I was aware it was your birthday, but the hour is long. I did have a funny thing planned for you this evening, which is why I was waiting, but I will pass at this point. And for those who are viewing, obviously Chief Priest does not know he's a chief, because his mug that he keeps showing us says chief on it. So I know there's a story behind this, so I took the bait. Anyways, I'm going to bring your attention. I know you have in board docs use of force statistics. I will get to those in a second. And normally under the town manager's report, he goes over our action plan, but he's allowed me to run through this during my time. And within the action plan will be a reference to the use of force. So I think it flows nicely. First, if you go back to our action plan, if you guys have that, which I believe that you do, we're still doing our engagement. Most recently with the community, I sat on a panel for Autism Speaks back in March for discussion regarding best practices when dealing with those with special needs, specifically autistic youth. And just as a reminder, many times during our training, with our officers when we do have a special needs or a person with autism who runs away. Often they seek water. So these are the little nuggets that's very important to have and to discuss and to find out. Secondly, obviously lights and sirens have an impact on these individuals, and our officers need to be aware of that. And as you know, we have the care component in our CAD system where we can register. Some folks can provide that information, so we will have that and know that in advance when we respond to different residents' homes for calls for service. Next, Assistant Chief Tara has been assigned to the Use of Force Task Force Subcommittee. They're doing a lot of good work in response to the Police Accountability Bill and the use of force component of that. A lot of the details he cannot discuss because it's confidential at this point. But part of their task is to develop a curriculum and a action plan going forward to implement consistency statewide for all police departments, to have the training component completed by January of 2022. It's getting compressed. We're up to about 7 or 8 months, and I hope they will have a document by July 1st. It would have to go to the post committee, which I sit on with others, to be approved, and we'll hope to have this rolled out by July of this year. If you've had a chance to check in box number 3, our policies, we're still putting policies online. I believe we're up to number 6 or 7. As we continue to update our policies, we will put them online. Again, just a caveat being anything dealing with special details or security will not be placed online. 4 is our use of force stats. I'm going to pass on this from now and come back to this at the end of my report. As you guys glance through that, 'cause I'm sure might be some questions. We've already briefly gone through the Civilian Review Board, so I'll pass through that. Again, please take some time over the next couple of weeks to review that document and provide us with your suggestions, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, so we have a robust conversation next time and really put some things forward with the new panel. Quick box number 6 with our body cams. Currently, we've just started with Panasonic. We had 2 other vendors that were in already. It was Motorola, which was bought out by WatchGuard. WatchGuard bought them out, as well as Axon. So we hope to have everything done, and everything's on plan to be done, completed for our T&E by July of this year, and we hope to make a selection and a purchase sometime by the end of July, early August. There were some questions regarding availability of funds. There is a state grant that is out there. We have been aware of this since last year and have made inquiries into the availability of the funding. Because of West Hartford status, we are probably only going to be eligible for 30% reimbursement. And at this time, unless there's a revision, 0% reimbursement for our in-car cams because we purchased them after 2010, I believe it was, per the grant. So regardless, it's an opportunity for us to recoup some of this money, these expenses. For the more distressed communities, they are eligible for 50% reimbursement. Next, dealing with the 1033 program. As a reminder, that's the military program, surplus program that West Hartford has participated in. We have finally made contact and got approval with the military. We will be sending back 19 rifles to Michigan within the next 3 weeks. We're ordering all the shipping documents and containers and all the paperwork. So that's a plus, and we're happy to be moving on with these rifles. You had an update in box number 8 dealing with social services and human services. The panhandling update, that's part of this component. So I will skip over that. So we've already discussed that. And lastly, regarding our efforts to increase minority hiring, as was previously discussed, HR does a good job blasting out emails and information to various groups and allowing them to be informed our ongoing rolling process for hiring. Specifically, two additional things. I was at St. Joe with a couple other staff members, St. Joe's, talking to the Director of Inclusion and Diversity to get some partnership and to get some folks to apply once they graduate, and any other connection. And the same thing at the University of New Haven. I have been in contact with Dr. Boyd there. He is the chair of their diversity and equity and inclusion. And the same thing, trying to siphon some of these kids, these youths with the, I call them kids as a 54, a 21-year-old now as a kid. I can't believe I'm saying that. But anyways, to get them to think about West Hartford. We do have to compete with the Gold Coast down there, but we have a lot to offer here, and we're hoping to get some of these students of diverse backgrounds to utilize and come to West Hartford. To the use of force, I will go now from the action plan. Number 4, dealing with our use of force document. If you have an opportunity to pull that up, I will quickly just walk through it, and then I will entertain any questions myself and AC Tara going forward. So in 2020, we've actually had this documentation information for some time, but more pressing issues came up, and we had a couple of meetings that we had to skip. So in 2020, we had 164 cases and where use of force was utilized. Of those 164 cases, that generated 441 use of force reports. So essentially, if we had a situation where there's force and there's more than one police officer, each officer is responsible for submitting a use of force document. Next, we have the total suspects where force was used against, which was 196. And understanding there have been multiple suspects at the same incident. And in these occasions where an arrest was made, it was in 136 occasions. One question might come up, well, why wasn't the entire 196 arrested? Some of those situations are where we have to use force for those who have mental illness and are, out of control, running away, and many times it's minimal force for just holding people down until medical can arrive. And when we mention force, it's very important. One thing that West Hartford does extremely well when it comes to use of force is we over-report. We'd rather err on the side of too much documentation than not enough. So when we talk about use of force and physical force, that's any force that exceeds the mere touching. So if we attempt to put handcuffs on someone, that's not a use of force. But if that person pulls away, or if they run, or anything like that, or there's any type of resistance, that requires a use of force report. So many times we envision use of force, grabbing, punching, kicking, taser, whatever the case is, which is included. But many of our use of forces are a minimal amount of force that's utilized. Our next block is what we have is broken down by gender. You can just go through that. The next block is race. And we have one slight typo here. Under white, it has 117, but actually the 67 Hispanics are included in white, so it's actually 50, and black, 78. Going down to the next category is broken down by age. The next box, type of force. So we had 310 incidents, and when hand, fist, foot, again, that could be tripping, grabbing, whatever the case is. Taser display, what that means is that taser is displayed, pulled out of the holster, but not deployed or utilized. So it's just a mere display that's showing, and compliance is gained. Taser drive stun, what that means is we deploy our taser, we take it out, and you actually place the taser on the individual and activate it, but the probes are not deployed. So that's what is called a drive stun. Normally with close quarters, when you don't have the distance available to deploy the probes. And 10 incidents when we had the probes were deployed. Handgun display, 120 incidents. Again, that will be multiple people at a situation, and display does not mean utilize. It also, we over-report, so if the gun is just pulled out of the holster, what we call the low ready, or sometimes just mere being removed, we require a use of force. The only exception to that, well, one of the exceptions to that would be, for example, if we're clearing a house on a burglary call or an alarm, and the weapons are deployed as you're clearing the house, if there's no one inside the house, that would not require a use of force. A canine, as you see here, we'll go to rifle display once, shotgun display once, and then canine is also considered use of force. We had 6 situations in which that occurred. Injuries, total number of suspects injured, 32. Number of officers injured, 20. Thankfully, those are low numbers. And it's very important to really understand, last year in 2020, we had 45,000 calls for service, and using our use of force data against that, force is only used in 0.36% of their 45,000 calls for service. So we really do a good job with our training. Our officers use de-escalation skills. They really don't resort to force unless necessary. And again, by definition, force might not be what people envision when they think about force. That concludes my report, and I'm willing and ready to answer any questions, as well as Assistant Chief Tara can jump in, and Lieutenant Vafiatis too, if we have something I cannot answer.
Thank you, Chief, for that fantastic and comprehensive report. I certainly got educated with these numbers here, so I definitely thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Chief? Counselor Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chief, thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it, and for compiling these numbers. They really help put in perspective the whole holistic view of things. I was wondering, Chief, a couple years ago, the West Hartford PD put on a couple workshops about the use of force, and it was really helpful. I know we're in the pandemic, and there's restrictions, but perhaps maybe when we can have people in rooms and all that, maybe we could revisit that again, because it was so well done. I think it was really well attended. Just throwing that out there, just because West Hartford PD does such a great job, and it's good to get that information out there. Just offering that. Thanks again, Chief.
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick. Yes, with a lot of things we have planned with our interactions with the public, they had to take a back seat because of the pandemic. But hopefully with people getting vaccinated and maybe we get to some semblance of herd immunity, we'd like to get back out into the public and really do some proactive things and interact, and similar things that you mentioned. One other thing we had planned for last year was a defensive tactics course for women to defend themselves against assaults and rape, and that had to be shelved because of the pandemic. So we are in the process of revisiting that for this year also.
Chief, thank you for that. I think that's really important for women and also young people, youth, to begin to look at something like that. Also, in terms of the pandemic, social distancing, has any thought been given to doing anything virtual, any type of virtual webinars promoting the same type of information?
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick, some of the stuff we did last year with our community conversations, if you recall, there was a lot of discussions and topics where we covered many of this. Going forward, it's hard to have the use of force information virtually. You really have to be there. Providing data is one thing, but you got to explain, you got to show, you got to demonstrate. So that's difficult to do in that environment. We did put the prohibited use of force tactics on our website. So we do have a video that is up on our website that shows the things that officers are not legally allowed to do. So that can be instructive, but for the application, and it just doesn't translate well in a virtual environment. But it is a good suggestion. Thank you.
Chief, Councilor Fay, did you have a question?
I'm all set,
Okay.
Councilor.
All right, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chairwoman Blanks. Through you to Chief Riddick. Thank you for the presentation on use of force. Do you think you could supply us with information on the number of hours that are police force received with respect to training and what would you call it, continuing education training on the use of force. I think that part is something that should also be attached to the use of force statistics to show that the number of hours that we dedicated to training and to understanding all about the use of force and how it correlates with our statistics, I think would paint a fuller picture in my view with respect to the results that you pointed out based on the number of calls for service and how many instances the use of force was actually used. I mean, how much force was used during different situations. I think there is a direct correlation between training and that statistic, and I think to be able to track that year to year would be very helpful, I think.
Thank you, Chief Reddick, through you, Madam Chair, and maybe AC Terror or Lieutenant Vafiatis can help me. I should have this information at the top of my head. I have previously provided the data on our use of force hours and training. Right now, I just cannot think of it, but I do know when it comes to our firearms in our training, our force continuum training, we have that at least once a year, sometimes twice, and when we deal with the firearms, again, the misconception is we just go to the range. Yes, we have to qualify X amount of rounds. Yes, we do have that qualifying round, but we still put our officers through situations to make decisions where force would not be justified. And occasionally, people make mistakes, right? We're fallible, and those people are pulled to the side. They are retrained. They're given additional hours of training in these situations so we don't have these mistakes or these errors occur in the field. In addition to that, we do run through at roll calls various scenarios, tabletop exercises, if you will, at roll call in various force situations. Each one of these shootings that have occurred recently in the past year or so are discussed at staff meetings and at roll calls. I was very pleased, and I'm going to embarrass Lieutenant Vafiatis before he was brought to the Detective Bureau. I can't remember what incident it was, but I had planned on discussing this, and we were having roll calls outside. I came to the roll call unannounced, and I pulled the lieutenant to the side afterwards and told him how appreciative I was that he already was discussing those situations that I was actually going to talk about, and he had talked about not getting caught into that quote unquote blue wall of silence about issues and to do the right thing all the time, no matter what. And in that particular situation, it may have been George Floyd, but I thought it was something else. But, we got to step out and do the right thing no matter who's around. So I was very pleased that our mid-management leaders were doing this on their own volition. They were listening to the stuff and the sentiments we've talked about and applying it, which is extremely important. And I'll stop blabbing in 2 seconds. To have that come from the vice president of the union, which he also serves at, says a lot. It really does. Thank you.
Mayor Cantor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it does say a lot, and thank you, Lieutenant. You're an incredible leader, and we're so appreciative of all that you do. I have a couple of questions on the. So now the current Civilian Review Board. I don't know if you've been hearing any. If that you've been hearing any complaints through that vehicle, but the new vehicle. So for reporting on what they're hearing, just because it's this new board and that will be up in July, would that be included on a separate report on how on how many on just what's being heard? And we might not know the individual case, but and how will that work?
Through you, Chief Riddick, Madam Chair, if I understand the question correctly, if the CPRB requests use of force information, I have no problem providing it, but I do think we might get our lines blurred between this Public Safety Committee and their function. And if the use of force resulted in a complaint from a civilian or whomever the case is, that would be included within that complaint review that would go to the CPRB.
Thank you. So, sorry, Madam Chair. So, I mean, so if it involved use of force, would it be on this report at all, or would it be completely separate in a separate through that CPRB reporting?
No, all use of force would be what I just the information I provided. It's all captured there. There's no other place that use of force is kept. There's no other document or repository. Everything is right here. If I'm
I understand.
am I
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just wanted to know if a complaint were to come in along with a particular use of force scenario, would it make sense to put another column there to say this, you know, there was a citizen review? I don't know. I'm just asking the question on how we can get information completely. And there would be, we are going to receive a report from the Civilian Review Board at some point at the end of the year, but I didn't know if that was something you thought about.
I think I understand your question now. Out of the 164 incidents, how many of those resulted in a complaint from a citizen? That we can add, yes. I didn't understand your question, but now I do. See,
Sorry about
there. You know, I get it now. Just a couple other things quickly. We are reinstituting our college academy in June. So that's starting back up. So we're moving towards the interactions with the public with that. So it's important to bring up too. Thank you.
I just had one follow-up, Madam Chair. On the self-defense, I know the chief knows this. There was a student actually that was interested in that self-defense training. Sorry if I said. I just didn't know what the age you would be offering that. Would that be something that would be 16 and above, or is it 18 or 21? What do you have a?
I don't remember, but I think it was like I don't want to speak out of school, but I think it was like 13. It was actually a low age, but I'll get that exact age for you. And actually, ACT, if you can just pull up Jane Doe No More, if they were the sponsor, we can get that information for you. And also, while we're on use of force, um, we periodically just review randomly the videos on use of force. So every use of force report that comes through is reviewed by training, whether we have the body cam, whether it's on the dash cams. So that goes through and every report is reviewed. And then periodically there's reviews of our tape on our dash cam that we have just in case there might be a situation where an officer, neglected to turn in a form and we're reviewing different calls for service. So we have internal reviews going on. And there are occasions where it might be brought to my attention or the like, and we will investigate that matter. So we have a really robust program here. And with all due credit, a lot of this was started prior to me being here. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh, Chief Riddick, no, it wasn't me. This was in place prior to me. So kudos to that team.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. Madam Mayor, are you all set? Anything further?
I am, and this is a question that I do get from the public actually. Do you review those, the national, the national, captured, videos, and local, and that, so, again, thank you for that, and much appreciated. You guys are just doing such a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick, the one situation, as you recall, there was a mistake an officer made nationally. It was Ohio and pulled the taser excuse me, I'm not sure that was Ohio, wherever it was. They pulled the taser instead of the handgun instead of the taser. The very next day, Captain Kriako went through and we started to implement to make sure that everyone had their taser on the opposite side. And two, going through and refreshing the training that taser, double check and make sure that's the case. In the heat of the moment, these things can happen, but unfortunately, there's some mistakes you can't recover from, and you have to face the consequences. So let's not be that PD, and I certainly don't want to be that chief. So kudos to the command staff for taking the lead and putting that forward to make sure that we reminded our folks of the importance of really knowing what you're doing at that time.
Well said, Chief. I just want to echo what everybody has said. You know, both you and Chief Priest and your staff, you all are just doing a fantastic job. You're doing the heavy lifting every single day. So I just can't, you know, really send the praises to you and your staff enough. I mean, you're just really, really huge role models and exemplary of what teamwork is all about. And it's not just a 9 to 5, but this job is around the clock. And I think this pandemic has definitely tested a number of people, and a number of people have risen to the occasion. And these two departments have certainly demonstrated that throughout this period. So you have gone above and beyond. And so I just can't thank you all enough for protecting the residents and businesses and everybody else in our town. Thank you so much to you and to the town staff. And so town manager, you're up, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I have a very short report. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee members for your time this evening, for the good direction that you're providing us and your good questions. I'd like to thank all the staff who are involved in preparing the reports we delivered tonight, as well as their good work all year round, as you have noted. Two additional points. Number one, this committee has a lot of very important and weighty topics on its agenda. So we are recommending, and you saw that with the schedule for our review of the fire department's efficiency and effectiveness study, that we resume meeting on a monthly schedule in order to really stay on top of that work and to be able to get through it in a timely way. We have been meeting every couple of months, but you know, now that we're meeting again in person with a hybrid offering, recommending resuming a monthly schedule. And then the second and last point I wanted to highlight is, again, I think you saw evidence of the interdisciplinary approach we like to take to solving more complex problems. And that is a number of departments working together. And we think we're able to arrive at better solutions than departments working alone or in silos. So really want to commend. Tonight we were talking about the Panhandling initiative and the partnership between social services, the police department, corporation council. That's just one example of the interdisciplinary approach we try to take on a very regular basis in how we approach our work. So thank you again, and we appreciate all of your time and your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. So are there any future agenda items? No? Okay, and before we actually adjourn, I just want to take the point of privilege to shout out the West Hartford Police Department. I read a post earlier this week about our officers visiting a lemonade stand to two young people in town. And I was just so touched by the fact that they supported the stand. And on top of that, they went as far as really showing off their youthful ability by engaging with these two youngsters. So I don't know if they're listening, if they're going to see the tape, but I just really want to say, you know, kudos to you, because that's really what community policing is all about. And those two young people will remember this for the rest of their lives, because this was a highlight moment. So really, I want to send all the shouts out to you, Chief, and to your staff. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you and good night, everybody.